Today's video goes over how to create a permanent data set using a libname and a data step. So for the midterm, I have a data set that is called midterm.txt, and so I've set up a data step that's going to read that data set into SAS. So let's run that. When we run that statement, we should see that SAS is able to read in the data successfully. But most importantly, we should note that when it reads it in, we're reading this into a temporary data set called midterm1. It's important to note that the difference between a temporary and a permanent data set is whether or not this data set will be available outside of SAS after you close it. The way that I've created the dataset midterm1 in this video currently is that it will be a temporary dataset. If I close SAS, I'll need to run this code again in order to read that dataset back into SAS to make it accessible to do other parts of the midterm project. One way to know this is to look at where the dataset is saved. In this case, it's saved into the work folder. And you can see that data set here, midterm1. Anything that exists in the work folder will be deleted when SAS is closed and lost forever. And here's the data set that was read in. If I want to make this data set permanent so that I can use it for later analyses or for doing additional updates or for submitting for my midterm project, say, then the first thing I need to do is set a libname. A libname is a nickname for a folder on your computer, and we're going to call ours stat480. And this is the general format. You tell SAS libname, you give SAS some nickname for that folder, and if you're working in the computer labs, please note that these nicknames have to be less than 8 characters. And then we're going to point it to a folder on my computer. In this case, I want to use my box folder, and so I'm going to go out and actually get the path like this. I'm going to navigate to the folder that I want to set for my libname, and I'm going to copy the path to that folder and paste it into SAS. Remember that libnames always point to folders, whereas in-file statements always point to files. So the end of our in-file statement actually tells the exact name of that file, whereas our libname statement points just to the outer folder, so this folder called data, not to an individual file. You can tell it's not a file because it doesn't have the extension, such as .txt or .sas7bdat, as part of the extension or path. Now, I'm going to set this libname, and what I should see is that it is set successfully per the log. And the log will actually say, was successfully assigned, and the folder that it was assigned to, which should be the same as your path above. Now, if I want to be able to access the dataset midterm1 outside of the SAS system after I close SAS, I need to do a data step that now includes my libname. So, when I do my data step, I'm going to have data, the libname, the nickname that I've just given the folder as part of my libname statement, and a new dataset name. So we're going to call this midterm final. We'll pretend that I've finished the project and I want to save that final dataset where I've made all my changes. In my set statement, I'm going to point that to the temporary file that I've created in SAS called midterm1, and then finally give it a run statement. So this is data libname dot dataset name, and this is what I want SAS to call that dataset at the end of when it saves. Then I point it to this temporary dataset, this dataset that we have in the work file, and as always my SAS statement ends in a run. So what we should see is that when I run this statement, it will end up in this library that I've created in SAS called stat480. So we should see a new dataset appear here. I run that statement, and indeed we see this data set appears. It's called midterm final, which is what I told SAS to call it. And if I open it, it will be identical to the data set midterm 1. so that SAS has saved an identical copy of that into a folder that now exists on my computer. We can confirm that this data set is now permanent by looking in the folder where I asked SAS to save it. Now, going back to that folder of my computer, I can see that there's a copy of this data set called midterm_final in the data folder that we pointed the libname towards. And so this tells me that the libname worked, and that now if I want to access that file in the future, I no longer have to read it in using the infile statement such as above. I can just actually set that and read it in using a set statement as part of the reading in process. It is now a SAS data set, so I no longer have to do the input or anything like that. And that's how you would create a permanent file from a temporary data set that you have in SAS.